A man pointed a gun at my daughter's face, right on my own land. I never thought a quiet night at my ranch would end with an HOA guard pointing a gun at my daughter, right at our own gate. From that moment, they built fake records, crossed my land, and claimed the road as community property. But what they didn't know, I still had the original deed. And when the truth hit the screen, their entire HOA kingdom fell in that very hall. Wind combed the grass short as a crew cut, and the last heat of the day clung to the iron gate. Headlights slid across the low hills and spilled into our valley like a river of white. The beams caught dust, made it glow, then swung toward my lane. I'd stepped onto the porch for the night check, the creak of old boards, the soft click of the deadbolt behind me, when a voice split the dark. "Freeze!" The word slapped the air. In the headlight wash, a pistol silhouette hung steady. The HOA security chief, Donald Snipe, boots braced in the gravel like he owned it, front sight lined on my daughter's face. Sarah had just swung the chain from the gate latch. She didn't flinch. Hands open, fingers spread where even a fool could see them. That calm came from 1,000 rooms with worse men and brighter lights. "Holster your weapon," she said, voice low and even. "You're brandishing on private property." My chest went cold, then hot. "That's my land," I said, words scraping. "And that's my daughter." The wind carried tank water and cut hay. Our porch light threw an amber ring across the yard. The gate sat in hard white like a small stage for a bad play. "On the ground," Donald barked. His partner hovered, hand on a holster he wasn't sure how to use. Sarah didn't move. "Special Agent Sarah Morrison," she said, showing a badge with one hand while keeping the other high. "Federal law enforcement. You're outside your authority. We have protocols. After-hours entries are documented. You didn't check in." "The code was issued at closing," Sarah replied. "The deed says the road begins at that cattle guard and ends at our barn. You're past the guard." I stepped into the yard. The dirt held the day's warmth. Splinters of old cedar pressed through my boot soles the way old memories press through a life. Quiet. Persistent. I'd built a dam 50 miles from here once, back when I still wore a government badge. I knew how power moved. Water, money, rules. Watching a gun follow my child's breath, I knew how it rotted when left in the wrong hands. "Holster," I said again, letting the porch light catch my face. Age sands the edge off anger. Some cuts the years don't close. Donald glanced at his partner, then back at Sarah. The muzzle dipped a hair. "Identification," he snapped. "You're not the agency that asks for it," Sarah said. "Stand down." He chose bravado. The muzzle climbed again, a dumb needle on a bad compass. In the corner of my eye, the lake made its soft, shushing sound. The same lullaby my grandfather heard when he stacked stones for a shore. We are not people who fight in the dust. We stack paperwork. We hold the line. We build things meant to last. But sometimes the first step to holding the line is saying it out loud. "Sheriff's on speed dial," I told him. "And so are your boss's bosses." His partner shifted, nerves creaking louder than leather. Donald kept his sights where he wanted them, but I heard the tremor in his breath. Fear convinces a man he's right when he's just louder. Sarah softened one notch. "No one has to be embarrassed tonight," she said. "Put the weapon away, step back to your vehicle, document your contact, and go home." The ranch road ran straight between waist-high grass, every rut knowing my trucks and boots. And yet here we were, told by a hired man that our steps required permission. He lowered the pistol, not honest low, but enough to keep blood from writing minutes. "We'll file an incident report with the board," he said. "Expect fines for obstruction." "Expect phone calls," I said, "about brandishing." He holstered, loud, as if the sound could count for more than the action. He stepped back into the cone of his headlights. shadow thrown long over the gate. The partner exhaled, relief like a gust. Sarah relocked the chain with one clean motion and came toward the porch. Only inside the circle of light did she meet my eyes. The night's danger reflected back like firelight on steel, bright, controlled. "You okay, kid?" I asked. "It's been worse in worse places," she said. "But he shouldn't carry." "No," I said. "He shouldn't." The SUV idled another beat, then backed up, gravel crunch uneven. It turned at the cattle guard, taillights a red smear on sage. When the gate fell out of their light, the stars rushed in. We stood in it. The iron ticked as it gave up the day's heat. Instead of the words a father swallows, I said, "Tea?" "Tea," she said. Inside, I watched her hands. She warmed a kettle and found 2 mugs. "He thinks the road's theirs," she said. "He's been taught to," I answered. "Some folks mistake confidence for title. Some folks sell that lesson." "Original deed?" "Original enough," I said, unrolling cracked manila beside the crisp, certified copy I pulled when polite letters started sounding like a handshake that tightens. Meets and bounds, lot lines, water rights, the road's ours, the lake's ours. That fence was set before most of those roofs were shingles. "We'll go slow. First, document. Second, define authority. Third, prepare for escalation." The kettle sang. "Who's on your list?" I asked. "Sheriff McKay for process and incident numbers," she said, counting softly. "Marcus Reed for anything that smells like money. Sarah Coleman if we need a water law letter. Ernest Walker because he remembers where the old survey pins are buried." "You just got home," I said, softer than I meant. She set the mug by my hand. "I came home," she said, "to help you hold it." The clock ticked. I thought about years on dams, how you rid flow, how you build for the 1 in 1,000 storm. Tonight wasn't the flood. It was the change in the river. When we finished, we walked back out. I lifted the latch on the old chest. Deed, surveys, my father's letter. I slid the papers in like tools after a long job. "Tomorrow," Sarah said, "we file our report." "To who?" "To Time," she said. Then with a half smile, "And to anyone trying to rewrite our lines." I stepped to the mid-yard where grass gives way to packed caliche. The gate stood black and sure against the sky. My hand found the cool top rail. I felt my father's hands, my grandfather's. "Hold," it seemed to say. "Hold steady." Behind me, the landline began to ring, the number only old friends and county offices use. Sarah and I looked at each other. "Sheriff?" she guessed. I nodded, and we went inside to answer. The phone crackled as Sheriff McKay's familiar baritone rolled through. "Evening, Jake. You still got those trail cameras up by the north gate?" "Since spring," I said. "Why?" He exhaled slow. "One of my deputies passed by after midnight. Saw HOA security vehicles parked half on your land. Said lights were off, but engines were running. You might want to pull that footage." The line hummed. Sarah leaned against the counter, arms crossed, the phone light painting a thin gold line across her cheek. "Guess that confirms what we saw," she murmured. By sunrise, word had already spread like smoke through Redwater County. At the diner, old ranchers sat over their black coffee trading versions of the story. Engineer's daughter from D.C. came home, federal agent now, nearly got shot by the HOA boys. I caught snatches when I stopped for fuel. Every retelling grew a new layer of myth, but one thing stayed true. Donald Snipe had drawn a weapon he had no right to hold. Back at the ranch, the dust still hadn't settled where the SUV had idled the night before. Sarah stood by the gate with her phone out, documenting tire tracks. The morning light picked out each groove in the dirt, fresh and sharp. The sign I'd welded years ago, Morrison Ranch, private access, hung a little crooked now. Someone had loosened the bolts. We didn't have long to breathe before the white SUV reappeared. Donald wasn't behind the wheel this time. A younger man drove, crisp uniform, face smooth with new confidence. The passenger door opened, and Bethany Whitfield herself stepped out. She was immaculate as always. Pastel blazer, gold brooch shaped like a hummingbird, tablet tucked under her arm. Her smile looked painted on. "Mr. Morrison, Ms. Morrison," she called, voice bright as glass chimes. "We had an unfortunate misunderstanding last night." Sarah said nothing. The wind tugged a strand of her hair across her cheek, and she let it stay. Bethany continued. "Our security personnel were following procedure. All entrances to community property must remain accessible after dark. You appear to have locked the shared access road." "It's not shared," I said. "Never was." She tilted her head, performing surprise. "According to our plats, the road runs concurrent with HOA maintenance jurisdiction." "According to the deed," I replied, "this road and the water beneath it belong to me. You built your fancy subdivision downstream, not up here." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. "Then I suppose we'll have to clarify ownership with the county records office. Until then, please refrain from obstructing community access." "Until then," I said, "stay off my property." Sarah stepped closer, her voice even. "Your security officer aimed a firearm at a federal agent last night. That's not an access issue. It's a felony." Bethany's composure wavered for half a second. "If that's true, I'm sure it will be handled internally. Good day, Mr. Morrison." She turned, heels grinding small stones as she walked back to her SUV. The taillights disappeared down the hill, leaving silence thick enough to taste. Sarah's jaw tightened. "They're laying groundwork," she said. "Letters, reports, building a story that says we're the problem." By noon, the first letter arrived. A single sheet of cream-colored stationery pinned to the gatepost with a brass thumbtack. Formal warning: obstruction of community access. I read it twice, then a third time. The signature at the bottom, Bethany Whitfield, HOA president, looked like it had been pressed by machine, not hand. I could almost hear Pops's laugh from 30 years back. "They can't take what you can prove you own." Sarah set up her laptop on the porch table. The hum of her fingers over the keys mixed with the low buzz of cicadas. "I'll request the county deeds tomorrow," she said. "We'll need the water rights ledger too." "Already got the originals." I lifted a tin lockbox from under the bench. Inside lay the old papers, edges yellowed, signatures faded but still legible. Sarah scanned each one with her phone camera. At dusk we drove into town. The courthouse sat like a tired sentinel on Main Street, sandstone walls glowing orange. The clerk recognized my name, disappeared into the archives, and returned with a folder thick as a Bible. "Been a while since anyone asked for these," she said. The documents told the story I already knew. My grandfather's purchase in 1954, renewal of the water rights in 1971, and the 1986 survey showing the ranch road entirely outside any subdivision limits. But what caught Sarah's eye was a new entry, barely 3 months old. Petition to annex roadway for community access maintenance, filed by Lakeshore Development LLC, signed by Bethany Whitfield. "She's moving pieces fast," Sarah said. "If the annexation clears, they can claim easement rights right through your gate." Outside, night rolled across the valley like ink. We drove home under a thin slice of moon, headlights cutting tunnels through the dust. The gate came into view, our gate, but a fresh stake gleamed beside it, wrapped with orange ribbon. Sarah stepped out, flashlight in hand. The tag fluttered. Proposed boundary adjustment, pending county review. My fists clenched on the steering wheel. "She's marking territory." Sarah's voice stayed calm, but her eyes glinted. Then we'll mark it back, with evidence. Behind us, the lake reflected the starlight, dark and steady. I thought of water under pressure, held behind concrete, quiet until it isn't. By morning, the air had shifted. You could feel it in the stillness, in the way the meadowlarks quit singing when the HOA trucks rumbled past on the county road. Sarah was already up before dawn, laptop glowing on the kitchen table. A thermos of coffee steamed beside her. "County office stamped Bethany's petition last night," she said without looking up. "Filed under emergency community access maintenance. It's a loophole meant for flood response, not HOA expansion." "She's faster than I thought," I said, "and meaner." Through the window, I caught movement near the southern fence line. 2 men in tan uniforms, clipboards flashing in the light. I stepped onto the porch, heart drumming. Their SUV idled by the mailbox, engine humming like a wasp nest. "Morning," I called. The taller one turned, hand shading his eyes. "Routine inspection, HOA maintenance survey." "This isn't HOA land," I said. He smiled the way people do when they've already decided they're right. "That's under review." Sarah joined me, phone raised, recording. The second man shifted, uncomfortable. The taller one muttered something into his radio, and the SUV backed down the road, tires grinding loose gravel. When they were gone, Sarah turned her camera toward the footprints they'd left. "Every trespass is evidence," she said. "Keep the ground dry so the impressions hold." That afternoon, the sky bruised purple and gray. Thunder rolled from the mountains, the kind that makes windows tremble before the rain ever falls. I spent the hours before the storm riding the perimeter, checking posts, making sure the cameras Sarah had installed still blinked green. By evening, the wind had teeth. I found a plastic envelope wedged under my truck wiper, an official HOA notice, laminated against the weather. Failure to remove obstruction, gate, within 72 hours will result in enforcement action and fines. I showed it to Sarah, who was cataloging files on her computer. "Enforcement action," I repeated. "You think they mean another midnight visit?" "Maybe," she said. "But next time, we'll have every second on video." The storm broke just before midnight. Rain hammered the roof like thrown gravel. Lightning ripped the clouds open, and for a flash I saw headlights creeping along the ridge road. Sarah appeared at the window beside me, her voice low. "That's them again." We watched the vehicle stop near the gate. 2 figures stepped out, rain slickers gleaming, flashlights cutting the dark. They circled the signpost, measuring, taking photos. One reached for the chain latch. Sarah tapped the glass. "Zoom camera 3, she whispered. The monitor on the table switched views. Close, clear, unmistakable. When the first man lifted the chain, I opened the door and shouted over the storm, "You're trespassing!" Both froze. Lightning made ghosts of them, faces pale, eyes wide. One yelled back with, "Authorized by the HOA." "Authorization doesn't override ownership," I shouted. "You step through that gate, you'll answer to the county." They hesitated, then retreated, boots splashing through puddles. Their SUV fishtailed down the road, taillights swallowed by rain. Inside, Sarah replayed the footage frame by frame. Each flash of lightning lit their faces clearly enough to identify. She leaned back, satisfied. That's the proof we needed. The next morning brought a different kind of storm. A beige sedan waited by the mailbox, a courier car. A woman in a windbreaker handed me a thick envelope. Certified mail for Mr. Jacob Morrison. The return address read Lakeside Pines HOA Legal Affairs. Inside, a notice of intent to file injunction for obstructing common access and interfering with authorized personnel. Sarah read over my shoulder, jaw tightening. They're setting up a false record, claiming we interfered with official duties. I ran a hand through my hair, the grit of yesterday's dust still under my nails. Let them file. We'll answer with the truth." She nodded. "And more." That afternoon, Sheriff McKay stopped by in his tan pickup, hat dripping from the rain. He studied the envelope on our table, then the still frame Sarah had printed from the footage. The two guards at our gate, hands on the chain. "I know one of these boys," he said quietly. "Donald's cousin. Worked security out in Coulter Springs before he got booted for aggressive conduct." "Will the county take this?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "With a sworn statement and the footage, yes. But Bethany's got friends on the zoning board. You'll need every bit of proof you can stack." "Then we keep stacking," Sarah said. By sundown, the rain had eased, leaving the land washed clean and smelling of sage. We walked the property line together, the sky bleeding gold behind the hills. Every puddle reflected the fence posts like small mirrors. Sarah stopped by the gate, crouched to tighten the padlock. "They'll come back," she said softly. "I know." She looked up at me, eyes steady, calm. "Then we'll be ready." The wind pushed at the tall grass, whispering through the wire. Somewhere beyond the ridge, an engine started, faint and distant. I watched the road until the sound faded, then turned toward the lake. Its surface was smooth again. No ripples, no headlights. Just the reflection of stars trembling in the dark water. We stood there a long time without speaking. The night full of quiet tension, the kind that builds right before the first crack in a dam. By morning, the mud had dried to a crust. The tire ruts from the security truck still cut deep through the clay. Sarah walked the length of them with her phone camera, crouching every few yards to get the right angle. She didn't say much, just let the wind carry the sound of the shutters. "You think Bethany'll risk sending them again?" I asked. "She doesn't have to," Sarah said. "Not when she has paperwork and money. The next attack will come by envelope." She was right. When we checked the mailbox, a new letter waited. Notice of administrative hearing. Alleged violation of community easement access. The hearing was scheduled for Friday, just 3 days away. That afternoon, Sheriff McKay stopped by again, a thermos of coffee in one hand. His patrol truck idled in the drive, its radio mumbling static. "Morning, Jake. Heard the HOA's planning some kind of internal meeting. You might want to record whatever you can this week." "I thought you said they were bluffing," I said. He sipped his coffee. "They were, until someone at county zoning signed their petition. That puts your access road in limbo. Technically public, technically private. Dangerous ground." Sarah joined us on the porch, holding a folder thick with printouts. "Then we need to show the chain of ownership. Everything from 1954 to now." McKay nodded. "And you'll need witnesses who remember the road before the development. Folks like Ernest Walker." Ernest lived a mile downriver, on the edge of what used to be open grazing land before the HOA fences went up. That evening I drove out there while Sarah worked on syncing our security footage with timestamps from McKay's office. Ernest's place smelled like rain and cut hay. He was sitting by his barn, sharpening a spade. "Heard about the trouble," he said, as I climbed out of the truck. "Didn't take long, did it?" "Long enough for them to start rewriting maps," I said. He chuckled without humor. "Bethany's been rewriting this valley since her husband bought that first parcel. She's got friends in county offices, lawyers in Bozeman, and a mean sense of entitlement. But she's not the first to think she could change the river." He handed me a folder, old survey papers, yellowed and brittle. "These are copies of the original water rights documents. My daddy helped file them back when the Bureau was still running the dam project. Shows clear as daylight where the boundaries fall." I turned the pages carefully. The ink faded but legible. There it was, Morrison Ranch, exclusive control of the upstream waterway and access road for maintenance, signed by my grandfather, stamped by the county engineer. "Thank you, Ernest," I said. "Don't thank me yet," he said, leaning on his spade. Bethany's got a way of twisting truth until it sounds like policy. When I got home, Sarah was still at the table, surrounded by laptops and legal pads. "You find what we should need?" she asked. I spread the documents across the wood. Better. The original rights filed before her HOA even existed. Her eyes lit with that steady, tactical focus I'd seen in her since she was a teenager. Then we can trace the fraud. I ran the HOA's security company name through federal registries. Guess who owns it? I frowned. Bethany's husband? Close. Her brother-in-law, under a Shell LLC registered in Delaware. Same address listed on 3 different contracts with inflated costs. Federal violation? Potentially, she said. Enough for Marcus to get involved. She pulled out her phone and called him. Agent Reed? It's Sarah. I've got something for you. HOA funds being funneled through a related party contractor. Paper trail looks dirty. She paused, listening. Tomorrow morning works. We'll have the files ready. When she hung up, I exhaled slowly. You sure you want to bring in the feds already? They pointed a gun at a federal officer, Dad, she said quietly. Now we make sure it's not just about that one guard. It's about every dime they stole hiding behind those fences. The next day dawned bright and clear, the kind of sky that hides trouble too well. I drove down to the post office and found a small, unmarked envelope waiting in our box. Inside were photocopied ledger pages, columns of figures, dates, check numbers, no sender. Sarah examined them under the kitchen light. Anonymous whistleblower, she said. Or someone inside the HOA getting nervous. We spread the pages out across the table, marking the same company names that appeared in Bethany's filings. The numbers told a story, payments looping between accounts, inflated maintenance costs, duplicate invoices. When Marcus arrived that afternoon, he brought a portable scanner and a calm professionalism that only made Sarah smile. You always bring the right toys, she teased. Only when the job smells interesting, he replied, scanning each sheet. This pattern's classic self-dealing, and those signatures, all Bethany's husband's handwriting, disguised as contractor initials. As the sun dropped behind the hills, the 3 of us sat in silence, the hum of the scanner filling the kitchen. Outside, frogs began calling from the edge of the lake. The air smelled of wet soil and pine. Sarah finally stood, stretching. Tomorrow, we file the evidence with the county and notify the Attorney General's office. Quietly. Quietly, Marcus echoed. I watched the 2 of them, young, precise, unshakable, and for the first time in days, I felt the balance shift, just slightly, back toward us. When the last document was scanned, Sarah closed the folder and said, They think they're untouchable because they play inside bylaws. Let's remind them laws still exist outside the HOA gates. That night, I checked the trail cameras one more time. In the glow of the screen, dust drifted across the images like ghosts. A figure moved near the fence line, broad shoulders, cap pulled low. Donald Snipe. He looked straight into the camera before turning away. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. I saved the clip to a separate drive and shut down the monitor. The wind outside carried the faint creak of the gate chain, slow, rhythmic, like breathing. Somewhere beyond it, in the dark, the evidence we'd gathered waited to crack the dam wide open. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the Lakeside Clubhouse, one of those polished wooden lodges built to look rustic, but smell like new money. I hadn't planned on attending, but Sarah said quietly over breakfast, If they're rewriting the rules, we need to watch them do it. We drove down the valley as the sun folded itself behind the ridges. The air carried a thin bite of autumn. Even the cattle in the lower fields seemed restless. The clubhouse sat on a bluff above the lake, its windows glowing amber, every pane reflecting the sunset, like fire behind glass. When we stepped inside, the room fell silent. Bethany Whitfield stood at the front table, gold pen poised, a row of HOA board members seated behind her, like loyal jurors. Donald Snipe leaned against the back wall in uniform, arms crossed, the same smugness flickering in his eyes. Bethany's smile didn't reach them. "Mr. Morrison," she said smoothly, "we weren't expecting you." "Seems I'm full of surprises," I replied. The rows of folding chairs were nearly full, homeowners clutching notepads, coffee cups, or curiosity. Sarah took a seat beside me, her expression unreadable. She had the same calm I'd seen before field operations overseas, patient, precise, dangerous in its stillness. Bethany tapped her pen against the microphone. "Let's begin. Item 1. Discussion and vote on revised security provisions, including authorization for property inspections where bylaw violations are suspected." Whispers swept through the crowd. A man in a plaid shirt raised his hand. "Does that mean security can enter our yards without notice?" Bethany smiled. "Only if there is probable cause, Mr. Jennings. These measures protect us all." Sarah leaned toward me. "She's formalizing the trespass," she whispered. I stood up slowly. "Madam President, before this board votes, I'd like to ask under what legal authority private security personnel are permitted to carry firearms on residential property." The room stilled. Bethany's smile tightened. "Our security team is licensed and insured, Mr. Morrison." I pulled a folded paper from my jacket. "The Montana Department of Licensing says otherwise. 2 permits expired last spring, and 1 applicant was denied renewal." Donald straightened, jaw clenching. Bethany flicked her gaze toward him before recovering her poise. "We'll have to verify that claim." "You should," Sarah said, her voice level but cold, "especially since one of those expired licenses belongs to the man who pointed a loaded gun at a federal officer." A ripple of gasps moved through the audience. Donald's nostrils flared, his boots shifted against the floor. Bethany's tone turned icy. "We won't entertain false accusations." "Nothing false about it," Sarah replied. "We have video footage with timestamps. Would you like me to play it?" Bethany's composure cracked for the briefest moment, just enough for everyone to see. She shuffled her papers. "We'll continue with the agenda." But the spell was broken. Homeowners murmured louder now, questions flying. Sarah whispered, "She's losing control." I let her handle the next moves. She'd been trained for confrontation disguised as diplomacy. When she finally stood again, her voice carried like steel wrapped in silk. "If this association truly values community," she said, "it shouldn't hide behind fear or false authority. Transparency builds trust. Abuse of power destroys it." The applause started hesitantly, then grew. Even the board members shifted uncomfortably. Bethany tried to gavel it down, but her authority sounded hollow against the echoing wood. When the meeting adjourned, Donald was waiting near the exit. "You think you can walk in here and humiliate me?" he hissed under his breath. Sarah met his glare head on. "No," she said. "You did that yourself." We left before the tension snapped. The night air outside was crisp, smelling of lake water and damp pine. The gravel crunched beneath our boots as we crossed to the truck. Halfway there, I noticed something glinting near the fence line, a spent brass casing, half buried in the dust. Sarah crouched and picked it up, turning it under the flashlight. "40 caliber, she murmured. "Same as the gun he pulled on me." "He's been back here," I said quietly. She pocketed the casing like it was a confession. "Now we've got something physical to pair with the footage." Back at the ranch, we printed stills from the video. Donald's face lit by the gate lights, gun drawn. Sarah labeled each photo with time, date, and location. Then she placed the bullet casing in a clear evidence bag and marked it with the same careful script. "You're building a case, not just a defense," I said. That's the only way this ends right, she replied. We don't shout louder. We prove quieter. The following morning, Marcus called. I've traced the HOA's payments to the security firm. The funds loop through 3 shell accounts before landing in a trust tied to Bethany's family. Classic embezzlement. Federal level. Sarah smiled grimly. Then it's time to make it official. We drove to the county courthouse with a binder full of evidence. Photos, documents, and ledgers. The clerk, a weary woman who'd seen every kind of small-town feud, raised her eyebrows as she flipped through it. You're not filing a complaint, she said. You're filing a storm. Good, Sarah said. It's overdue. That evening, clouds gathered again over Redwater Valley. The air was heavy, electric. At the gate, the padlock gleamed under the porch light, the chain unmoved since the last storm. But the silence felt different now. Not fear, not retreat. The kind of quiet that comes before a reckoning. I poured 2 coffees and handed one to Sarah. She took it, her eyes still on the horizon. Tomorrow, she said softly, they'll learn what boundaries really mean. By sunrise, the fog hung low over Redwater Lake, and the hills beyond looked like sleeping giants under a gray blanket. The storm had passed, but the air felt heavy, like the earth itself was waiting for something to give. The morning mail brought no letters, only silence, that kind that hums in your bones. Then, around 10, a pickup rolled slowly up the drive. I recognized it before it turned off the engine. Old Ernest Walker, my nearest neighbor, a man built from timber and stubbornness. He carried a thermos and a folder tucked under his arm. Jake, he greeted, voice deep as gravel. Heard the boards stirring trouble again. Seems they never stopped, I said. Coffee? He nodded, stepping onto the porch. Make it black. Sarah joined us, her tablet under one arm, scanning the ridge with eyes that missed nothing. Ernest watched her a moment, then smiled softly. Heard your girl works with the feds now. That true? Sarah nodded. FBI Tactical Command, sir. He whistled low. Well, hell. Guess they picked the wrong family to mess with. He opened his folder, revealing weathered survey maps, yellowed by time. These are copies of the original county plats from before lakeside development existed. My father helped dig the ditches that carried water from the dam to the first farms. This, he tapped one page, shows the access road. Belongs entirely to Morrison property, right up to the lake edge. No HOA claim, no shared rights. Sarah smiled, genuine this time. This will help more than you know. Always figured, Ernest said, leaning back. Bethany Whitfield's been trying to bend those lines since she bought her lake house. You know she had her husband's company file false easement requests in 19? County denied them, but they tried again last year. That explains the orange stakes, I said. He nodded grimly. She doesn't like to hear no. Sarah glanced toward the dirt road, where the morning mist still hovered. Does she have allies nearby? Some, Ernest said, but most folks are tired. Fines, warnings, gossip, it wears them down. People start thinking peace is worth any price, even their dignity. Sarah folded the map carefully. That's how bullies win. Not through power, through exhaustion. Later that afternoon, another car came crawling up the lane, a white Lexus with polished chrome. Out stepped Sarah Coleman, my old colleague from the dam project, now a respected water law attorney. She wore jeans, a blazer, and the kind of calm you only earn after years of arguing with bureaucrats. Jake, she said, smiling, you still keeping that gate chained? Tighter than ever. She laughed, then turned serious. I got your message. Brought everything I could from the Water District archives. She lifted a heavy binder from the passenger seat. Bethany's been filing incremental claims, tiny changes to wording, trying to slip water management rights into her HOA charter. Clever, but illegal. Sarah Morrison leaned over the binder. So they've been rewriting jurisdiction piece by piece? Exactly, Sarah Coleman said. If they'd succeeded, they could control who accesses the lake, and by extension, who controls the dam's maintenance road. They were setting up a legal noose around your land. I rubbed my temples. So this isn't just about fences anymore. It never was, Coleman replied. It's about leverage, property values. Once the HOA controls the road, they can claim a portion of the water easement and bill the state for maintenance. That's where the real money flows. Sarah Morrison exhaled slowly. That's federal fraud territory. Coleman nodded. Which means your friend Marcus will have plenty to chew on. We spent the next few hours mapping everything on the dining table. Ernest's survey maps, Coleman's legal files, and Sarah's video evidence. The table looked like a war room, papers spread out like battle lines. When we were done, Ernest tapped a knuckle on the wood. You've got the truth, he said. But truth doesn't win unless folks believe it. And around here, they believe what Bethany tells them. He stood, stretching his back. You'll need more than law. You'll need neighbors brave enough to stand up. After he left, the three of us sat in the quiet, listening to the ticking of the old clock. Outside, the lake shimmered like glass, too still for comfort. As dusk fell, Sarah opened the anonymous envelope again, the one that had contained the ledgers. Whoever sent this risked something, she said softly. Maybe we're not as alone as it feels. Coleman gathered her things. Tomorrow's the HOA board's emergency meeting. They'll try to finalize their new inspection rule. You'll want to be there. I wouldn't miss it, I said. When the house emptied, I walked down to the gate. The sun was sinking behind the ridges, throwing long shadows across the road. I traced the line of the fence post with my fingers. Wood rough, wire humming softly in the breeze. The same post my father had planted 40 years ago. Sarah joined me, camera hanging from her shoulder. You think they'll back down? Not yet, I said. But fear's a fragile weapon. Once you shine light on it, it melts. She smiled faintly. Then let's bring the floodlights. As we turned back toward the house, a gust of wind lifted the dust by the gate. Something fluttered from under a loose rock, an envelope sealed and unmarked. Sarah picked it up, eyes narrowing. Inside was a single flash drive. No note, no handwriting. Just one word written on the plastic in black marker. Proof. The crickets had started their evening chorus, a low hum threading through the valley. Sarah pocketed the drive. Looks like the ghosts are talking. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Not fear, not even anger. Hope. The kind that comes right before the storm breaks. By dawn, the sky above Redwater Valley burned pale orange. Thin clouds stretched like brushstrokes across the horizon. Sarah had been awake long before me, coffee untouched beside her laptop. The glow from the screen painted her face cold and determined. It's encrypted, she said, holding up the flash drive from the envelope. But not professionally. Someone local, maybe someone inside. She typed commands, each keystroke a small percussion in the quiet kitchen. After a few minutes, a folder bloomed open on the screen. Scanned invoices, emails, and ledger sheets. At the bottom, a spreadsheet labeled Operating Transfers, Lakeside Pines HOA. The columns told the story plain as daylight. 5 years of financial bleed. Payments routed through a fake maintenance company owned by Bethany's brother-in-law. Deposits to an offshore account. And inflated security budgets that lined pockets instead of paying for fences or lights. Sarah leaned back, exhaling. We've got them. I studied the numbers, feeling the slow, heavy satisfaction that comes when the truth finally matches what your gut's been warning you all along. Marcus needs to see this, I said. She nodded, pulling out her phone. I'll call him. He can verify the transactions through federal channels. Before she could dial, the crunch of tires echoed down the drive. A black pickup stopped at the gate. Donald Snipe stepped out, mirrored sunglasses hiding his eyes. Another guard stayed behind the wheel, idling. Sarah's voice stayed steady. "He's not here for a chat." Donald waved a folded paper in the air. "Notice of violation," he barked. "Failure to comply with HOA directives." I walked halfway down the gravel path. "You're trespassing again, Donald. That gate marks the line." "Lines change," he said. "Not this one," I replied. He tossed the paper over the fence. It landed face up in the dust. HOA enforcement warning. My name was bold at the top. At the bottom, Bethany's signature, neat and looping, underlined in blue ink. Donald smiled thinly. "We'll see you at the meeting tonight, Morrison. The board's voting on your removal from the association rolls. Means your access privileges end." I looked at Sarah. "We don't have privileges," I said quietly. "We have deeds." He smirked and climbed back into the truck. The tires spun, spitting gravel, and the vehicle disappeared down the road. Sarah picked up the paper, shaking her head. "They're desperate. This is panic disguised as power." When Marcus arrived an hour later, his briefcase thudded onto the table. "I reviewed the drive," he said, eyes sharp. "They're cooked. These transfers cross state lines, wire fraud, tax evasion, the works. But we'll need to present it right." "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning you'll let them show their hand first," he said. "They'll overreach tonight, and that's when we drop this." Sarah smiled, faintly. "You always liked a good sting." Marcus's grin didn't reach his eyes. "It's only fun if the guilty don't see it coming." By sunset, the clubhouse lights glowed again, bright against the bruised sky. The parking lot was full, neighbors gathering like spectators at a trial. The air hummed with whispered speculation. Sarah carried a small black case holding copies of the ledgers, while I held the envelope containing Ernest's maps and Coleman's legal documents. Inside, Bethany stood at the head of the table, pearls gleaming under the chandeliers. Her voice carried easily. "We have before us a resident who continues to obstruct community safety measures. Tonight, the board will decide appropriate sanctions." Murmurs rippled. Donald loomed at the side wall, arms crossed. I stood slowly. "Before you vote," I said, "I'd like to ask one question. How exactly are community safety funds being spent?" Bethany's smile didn't waver. "On security, maintenance, and administrative services, as the bylaws specify." Sarah stepped forward. "Then you won't mind if we share a breakdown of those expenses?" From the front row, Marcus, disguised in a plain jacket, posing as a resident guest, nodded slightly. Sarah connected her laptop to the projector. The screen behind Bethany flickered to life, displaying rows of figures and wire transfers. "This," Sarah said, her voice calm and clear, "is where your fees actually go. Offshore accounts, fraudulent contractors, and personal purchases billed to HOA expenses." A hush swept the room. Bethany's face drained of color. "This is outrageous!" she snapped. "You're trespassing on private records." Marcus stood, flashing a small badge. "Federal jurisdiction overrides your privacy, ma'am." Gasps rippled. Donald shifted uneasily. I walked to the front, laying down Ernest's old survey maps and Coleman's documents beside the projector. "And while we're at it," I said, "here's the proof the road and lake access never belonged to this HOA. You've been trespassing for years." The crowd erupted. Voices, questions, disbelief. Homeowners stood shouting over one another. Sarah remained composed, watching Bethany flounder. "You're finished," she said softly to the president. Bethany slammed the gavel against the table. "This meeting is adjourned." "Not yet," Marcus said. "You'll want to see the final page." He clicked the next slide. A scanned email from Bethany to her brother-in-law. detailing payment instructions for security incentives. The subject line read, "Keep Morrison under pressure." Donald's jaw tightened. "That's not what it looks like," he muttered. "It's exactly what it looks like," Sarah replied. The sheriff, standing by the doorway as quiet backup, finally spoke. "Mrs. Whitfield, I think it's time you and Mr. Snipe come with me." Bethany's voice trembled. "You have no right." McKay's eyes hardened. "You'd be surprised what the law allows when truth hits daylight." As he led them out, murmurs filled the room again, quieter this time, relief mingling with disbelief. Marcus gathered the documents. "This will go to the county prosecutor first thing tomorrow," he said. "They won't wiggle out of it." Outside, the lake reflected the last of the sunset, streaked with red and gold. Sarah stood by the truck, watching ripples move across the surface. "Feels like it's over," I said. "Not quite," she answered. "They'll fight it in court, but tonight we changed the tide." I looked back at the clubhouse lights flickering through the trees, then let it roll. The wind rose off the lake, carrying the faint scent of rain and cedar. For the first time since this all began, the valley felt honest again, like it remembered which lines still mattered. But honesty, I've learned, doesn't come without echoes. By morning, the HOA's so-called community board had exploded online. Screenshots, recordings, and meeting clips spread through Redwater County faster than wildfire. By noon, even the local radio station was calling it the HOA scandal at Lakeside. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through messages. "Half the neighborhood's calling to apologize," she said. "The other half's trying to figure out which way the wind's blowing." "Same as always," I said. "They don't care who's right. They care who's left standing." Marcus arrived not long after, suit jacket thrown over one shoulder, face drawn tight from too many calls. "County prosecutor's office is swamped," he said. "They're forwarding evidence to the state attorney, but Bethany's lawyer is already stalling. They're filing motions to suppress." Sarah crossed her arms. "We expected that." "They're also blaming Donald," Marcus added quietly, "calling him a rogue contractor who acted on his own." I felt my jaw clench. "That's not just cowardice, it's strategy." "Exactly," Marcus said. "They're isolating him, cutting him loose so the rest of them can claim ignorance. If Donald flips, the board collapses. If he stays quiet, they buy time." That evening, a new notice appeared on our gate. Handwritten this time. No logos, no signatures, just 4 words in black ink. "You made a mistake." Sarah tore it down, folded it neatly, and slipped it into a plastic bag. "Intimidation," she said. "Weak men always whisper when they've lost their megaphone." The next day brought the emergency HOA assembly, the one Judge Ramirez had ordered to address the fraud investigation. The community center buzzed with uneasy energy. Neighbors filled every chair, lining the walls, murmuring like spectators before a verdict. The air smelled of sweat, old wood, and the tang of lake water carried in on boots. Outside, rain threatened again, dimming the light through the tall windows. Bethany sat at the front table, pale but still defiant, her pearls replaced by a thin silver chain. Donald wasn't beside her. He hadn't been seen since the night the sheriff escorted him away. The empty chair next to hers spoke louder than any testimony could. Judge Ramirez entered quietly, coat damp, expression carved from stone. "Let's make this clear," he said, voice deep and steady. "This meeting isn't about gossip. It's about governance, property law, and accountability." Bethany rose, feigning composure. "Your Honor, I must protest these theatrics. The allegations—" "Sit down, Mrs. Whitfield," he said calmly. "You'll get your turn." Sarah leaned close to me. "He's not here to lecture," she whispered. "He's here to finish this." When the floor opened for statements, I stood. The microphone felt heavier than it should have. "I came here for peace," I said. "I paid my dues, followed the rules. But somewhere along the line, those rules stopped protecting people and started protecting power." I paused, scanning the room. Eyes met mine. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to, others who'd turned away in the grocery store. Now they listened. Sarah stepped beside me, calm and clear. "We have documented evidence of financial misconduct," she said. "Transfers, falsified permits, and misuse of homeowner funds. But this isn't just about money. It's about intimidation, trespassing, surveillance, and threats." She pulled up the projection, photos, timestamps, the video of Donald pointing a gun at her. The room fell to a grave silence, broken only by the hum of the old lights. Bethany stood abruptly. "That video's been tampered with. This is an invasion of privacy." From the back of the room, a new voice rose. "No, ma'am," said Sheriff McKay, stepping forward. "We verified the metadata. It's as clean as the morning it was recorded." He turned to the crowd. "You all wanted to believe she was the problem. But the truth's been staring you in the face for months. I should have stepped in sooner." Bethany's composure cracked. Her voice sharpened. "You don't understand. Curtis, Donald, he acted independently. The board had no control." Marcus rose from the second row, holding a printed document. "You mean this?" he asked. "The email where you instructed him to enforce property compliance at any cost? That's your digital signature." Bethany froze. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The murmur in the room grew louder, rising like the lake wind before a storm. Judge Ramirez motioned for order, then spoke quietly, almost sadly. "Mrs. Whitfield, the evidence is overwhelming. You and your board abused your authority for personal gain. This community deserves better." He turned to the crowd. "Effective immediately, the HOA's leadership is suspended. A provisional committee will take over operations under county oversight. Further charges are pending." The gavel fell once, echoing like a distant gunshot. Bethany swayed, gripping the table. "You can't just erase me," she whispered. "I built this place." Sarah looked at her, not with anger, but pity. "No," she said softly. "You built walls, and now you'll finally see who lived outside them." When it was over, rain began to fall, slow, steady drops tapping on the roof. People filed out quietly, some pausing to shake my hand. Ernest tipped his hat. "Knew you'd bring it back to level, Jake," he said. Outside, the night air smelled like wet pine and justice. Sarah stood beside the truck, letting the rain wash across her face. "It's not finished," she said, "but it's turning." I looked back at the glowing windows, silhouettes moving inside. The hall of faces, neighbors, former enemies, witnesses, finally seeing the truth reflected in their own eyes. "Turning's good enough for now," I said. "Let the current do the rest." The rain thickened, washing the last of the dust from the ranch road. As we drove home, the headlights caught the water running clean again through the ditches, carving its old path toward the lake. For the first time, the land felt lighter, like it could breathe again. 2 mornings later, Sarah found an official notice folded neatly against our front door, weighed down by a smooth river stone. It wasn't from the HOA this time. The seal at the top read, "County Court of Redwater." "Bethany's filed a counterclaim," Sarah said, scanning the document. "She's alleging defamation and unlawful interference with corporate governance." I took the paper from her hand. "She's still fighting." "She always was," she said, quiet but certain. "People like her don't quit. They pivot." The trial came quicker than I expected. A hearing, they called it, but it felt like a reckoning. Inside the courthouse, the air was cool and heavy with the smell of paper and rain-soaked leather. The gallery filled with familiar faces, neighbors, reporters, even a few county officials who wanted to see what came next. Judge Ramirez presided again, same steady eyes under heavier lines. Sarah sat beside Marcus, folders stacked like fortifications in front of them. I stood behind, watching Bethany take her seat at the defense table. She looked smaller without her board behind her, though she still wore that mask of composure, a queen stripped of her crown but still clinging to the throne. Her attorney, a tall man in a polished gray suit, opened with the usual song. My client acted in good faith, within her authority, to protect community interests. These allegations of fraud and misconduct are exaggerated, driven by personal vendetta. Marcus rose in response. Then let's begin with the ledger, he said, and the emails instructing the misallocation of funds. Sarah opened the folder and began reading from the records, wire transfers, handwritten approvals, and the offshore accounts traced to Bethany's family trust. Each word hit like a hammer, slow and deliberate. The courtroom's whispers fell away until only her voice remained. Bethany's lawyer objected twice, but the judge waved him down. "Continue, Agent Morrison," Ramirez said. When she finished, Marcus presented the county deed maps, signed decades ago. "And here," he said, tapping the display, "we have proof that the Morrison family's ownership predates the HOA by 30 years. Their road, their lake access, their water rights, all confirmed by county and federal surveyors." The defense scrambled, filing motions mid-session, but every move only deepened the hole. Then came the twist. Marcus handed the judge a sealed envelope, one Sarah hadn't seen before. "Your Honor, this arrived at our office yesterday," he said. "Anonymous submission. Inside our audit records from Lakeside Security Services, the firm Bethany claimed was independently contracted. The signature on the payroll checks matches the defendant's own." The judge adjusted his glasses, frowning. "Mrs. Whitfield, would you care to explain why you were signing paychecks for a company you claimed you didn't control?" Bethany hesitated for the first time, her voice faltering. "It was procedural oversight. My husband handled most of the—" Marcus interrupted, polite but cutting. "Your husband's name doesn't appear on these accounts, ma'am. Yours does. And those accounts link directly to the diverted HOA funds." A collective murmur rippled through the gallery. Ernest, seated near the back, nodded slowly to himself. Judge Ramirez leaned back. "Enough," he said. "The evidence is sufficient. The court finds probable cause for referral to state prosecution on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and illegal intimidation under community governance statutes." Bethany's breath caught like she'd been struck. Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then Ramirez turned to me. "Mr. Morrison," he said, his tone softening, "as for your property rights, this court upholds your exclusive ownership of the access road, the lake boundary, and associated water rights. The HOA's jurisdiction ends at your fence. The injunction filed against your residence is null and void." A weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying fell off my shoulders all at once. I met Sarah's eyes. She didn't smile, but her expression said everything. Calm victory, quiet justice. Outside the courthouse, the clouds were breaking apart, revealing thin threads of sunlight. Reporters tried to catch us for comment, but Sarah just said, "The record speaks for itself." We drove home in silence. The gravel road shimmered under the late afternoon light, puddles glinting like small mirrors. At the ranch gate, I stopped the truck and stepped out. The air smelled of sage and iron. Sarah followed, her boots crunching softly on wet stone. "It's over," she said. "Almost," I said. "Paper takes time. Justice does too." Behind us, the lake gleamed, full, calm, and steady. The water level had risen with the rains, and I could hear it moving through the reeds, brushing against the stones like an old friend returned. Marcus called that evening. "Bethany's assets are being frozen pending investigation. Her lawyer's already negotiating. If she cooperates, she'll avoid federal time. I don't care if she spends a night or a year in a cell, I said. I just want this land left alone. He chuckled softly. Then you got what you wanted, Jake. And maybe a little more. When I hung up, Sarah was on the porch, gazing across the valley. Funny thing about floods, she said. They destroy a lot, but sometimes they wash away exactly what needs to go. I stood beside her, watching the sky fade from gold to violet. The land was quiet again, the kind of quiet that hums like a promise. Boundaries matter, I said. Sarah nodded. And now, everyone knows it. Down by the gate, a single paper sign flapped in the evening breeze, weathered, half-torn. Private access, by deed. For once, no one was there to tear it down. The following weeks passed with an odd quiet, the kind that settles after thunder, when the valley still listens for one last echo. Each morning, the lake shimmered a little clearer. No patrol trucks, no idle engines, no tire ruts cutting across the banks. The air smelled of wet pine and freedom. Sarah stayed longer than she'd planned. We spent mornings fixing the fence and evenings on the porch, coffee cups warm against the chill. The storm clouds that had ruled the sky all summer finally gave way to autumn light. The county sent letters of closure. The HOA board formally dissolved, assets transferred to a court-appointed trustee. Bethany Whitfield's house went dark within a week. Windows bare, mailbox empty. Rumor said she'd left the state after turning over every record Marcus demanded. One afternoon, I drove down to the courthouse to sign the final settlement papers. The clerk smiled when she handed me the deed copies. "Clean as a whistle now, Mr. Morrison," she said. "No liens, no claims. You're free and clear." Free and clear. I carried those words like a prayer all the way home. Sarah was in the garden when I returned, hands buried in soil, the smell of tomato vines thick in the air. "Judge Ramirez called," she said, brushing dirt from her palms. "He wanted to thank you. Said your testimony helped set precedent for property rights cases across the county." I chuckled. Never thought I'd make history just by holding on to a fence. "You did more than that," she said. "You proved people don't have to surrender just because paperwork says they should." We sat by the lake that evening, the water calm enough to mirror the sky. A heron lifted off the reeds, wings whispering over the surface. Sarah watched it until it disappeared. "When I first came home," she said, "I thought I was just visiting, resting between assignments. But this," she looked toward the ranch, the hills rolling behind it. "This feels like the kind of fight that matters." "It was yours as much as mine," I said. "You just knew how to win it legally instead of stubbornly." She smiled. "You taught me stubbornness." Dusk came slow, painting the fields in bronze. From where we sat, the rebuilt gate stood straight again, the new sign freshly carved in cedar. Morrison Ranch, Est, 1954. Beyond it, the road glowed faint under the last light, leading down to where the old HOA fences had once stood. Only stumps remained now, cleared by volunteers who'd grown tired of division. Marcus called later that night. "The case made state headlines," he said through the crackle of the line. "They're calling it the Redwater precedent. The state attorney's office is already using your evidence for another HOA investigation." I laughed softly. "Guess that means we won't be invited to any more neighborhood barbecues." He chuckled. "Probably not, but you've got something better, your peace back." After the chief call, I walked down to the water's edge. The moon hung low, white as bone, reflecting off the ripples like scattered coins. The dam hummed faintly in the distance, a sound that had always comforted me, steady, reliable, man's heartbeat stitched into earth and steel. Sarah joined me, jacket wrapped tight. "Tomorrow I head back to D.C., she said quietly. "I figured," I replied. "The country never runs short on trouble." She looked at the gate one last time. "You'll be fine here?" I smiled. This land raised 3 generations of Morrisons. It knows how to look after its own. Before dawn, I walked her to the truck. The horizon was just starting to glow, frost glinting on the grass. She hugged me tight, then climbed in and rolled down the window. "You ever think about selling this place?" she teased. "Not after what it took to keep it," I said. She laughed and drove off toward the county road. The sound of the engine faded into the open hills, leaving only the hush of wind and water. I stood there until the sun broke over the ridge, throwing gold across the pasture. The gate swung gently, the new chain clinking soft against the post. Somewhere, an eagle called from the cliffs above the dam. Inside the house, I poured a single cup of coffee and set another on the porch rail for habit's sake. The silence felt different now, not lonely, but earned. Later that morning, I replaced the old paper notice with a wooden plaque, carved by hand. Private access, by deed and by law. I stepped back, looking at the line of the fence, the road stretching beyond it, the shimmer of the lake beyond. It wasn't just a boundary anymore. It was a promise. Sometimes victory doesn't roar. It rustles in the grass, hums through the wire, and drifts across the water like morning light. The land was free, and for the first time in a long time, so was I. If you've ever had to stand your ground for what's yours, you know how it feels when justice finally breathes. Drop a yes in the comments if you'd have done the same. Or tell me how you handled your own HOA story. Out here, we believe land, truth, and dignity are worth defending. Quietly, but completely. Stick around and subscribe if you want more real stories of ordinary folks finding justice on their own ground.